Okay, so this next presentation is kind of two things. We're going to talk about how to make good visual aids, whether you're using PowerPoint, Prezi, Emaze, whatever else, and also some tips for being a good public speaker. Now remember, both of these things do count as 25% of your grade, so again, it's important that you not only watch these presentations, but that you take notes and then try to uh, enact these things in your work as much as possible. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So, tips for creating good visual aids. All right, so digital visual aids. Okay, so here's the first thing. So number one, less is more. Now I like to operate with the phrase of $5 per word. And what that means is if you imagine that every single word you put on your presentation costs you roughly $5, how much information are you actually going to put on there? Not very much, right? So less is more. So you want to avoid these things. You want to avoid complete sentences. You want to avoid long paragraphs of information. You want to avoid over cluttering the slide with a whole bunch of pictures and words and things like that. Less is more. We want to be able to read it and we want to be able to see it more than anything else. And if you have so much on the slide that we can't do either of those things, then we have a problem. So let me show you an example of what I'm talking about. So let me move my head a little bit. So we've got the epidemic of sexual assault on college campuses. All right, that'd be an example, right? It's a big bulleted sentence. It requires additional information from you. So you have to expand on that information on the slide. Okay, this would be a bad example. All right, college sexual assault is a problem in this country. Statistics show that 1 in 5 women will be assaulted in their lifetime, and that is just based on what is being reported. Clearly, we need to do something about this issue. So today, I would like to talk about what we can do to help solve this problem. This this is a problem right here because we have so much information on the slide. We've got these long, complete sentences. And if you think about it, if you put long, complete sentences on the slide, two things are wrong, right? The first thing that's going to be bad is that you're probably going to turn your back on the audience and just read from the slide. And that's a problem. You're not going to be making eye contact with us. You're not going to be engaging with us. That's bad. The second thing is if you put every single word you want to say and every single little bit of information you're going to say on the slide, then what does the audience need the presenter for, right? This requires more explanation. This requires the presenter to expand. The audience needs the presenter to tell us more about this. This really does not. Okay, so I want you to avoid things like this because it doesn't really require the presenter to do much information, to do much work other than just read off the slide, and your audience could do that on their own. Okay. All right. The second thing we want to avoid is the second thing we want to make sure we work on is readability. We got to make sure we can read it. We got to make sure we can see it. A couple things I want you to note that images on the screen are darker than they appear. So things are going to look better on your screen, on your own laptop, than they will on the projector. So just make sure you're being cognizant of that. All right. You want to use light fonts on dark backgrounds, dark fonts on light backgrounds. Um, it's really bad if your audience has to squint or if we have to turn off every single light in the room so we can see the words on your presentation. So that just make sure that your visual aid uses just make sure that your visual aid uses appropriate fonts and color schemes, okay? If you're trying to decide between words and pictures, words are more important than pictures. Pictures can be really great on the presentation, but just make sure that we can read the words first before we can see the pictures, okay? And last but not least, pre-made slide layouts are good. I know we like to get really fancy and get really creative sometimes, and we want to put like these big pictures as the background on our PowerPoint slides, and it just doesn't look very good. It looks sloppy. So the pre-made slide formats and layouts are really, really good. I would encourage you to use them. You can still alter them enough where you can still be creative, but use the pre-made stuff. I think it works better. Okay. Here's an example, right? Big, bold, we can see it, it's clear. This would be a non-example, right? Now we can see it pretty well, but from far back, because we're looking right at the screen, we can see it a little bit better. But if you're sitting far enough away and some lights are on the room, this is going to be harder to see, right? We have this really tiny font, this light font on this light background, just not good. This would be great. We want to do this. This would be problematic. And I know this seems kind of goofy, but I have seen people do this and it really does mess up their presentations. Make sure you avoid things like that. Okay. And last on tips for your visual aid is this, that you are the speaker, not the visual. All right. A visual aid is a fantastic tool because it can really enhance your presentation with images, with limited text, and with video. Like, it really does help you convey your message because your audience can visualize some of the things, some of the points that you're trying to make. It can be really effective. But what a visual aid will not do for you is it will not deliver your speech for you. Again, you are the speaker, not the visual. Okay, so don't rely on the visual to do all the work for you. You're still gonna have to work. You're still gonna have to work. All right, you're still gonna have to practice the speech. Just because you have a really good visual does not mean that you're not gonna have to practice your presentation. All right, you want to avoid turning your back on the audience. Don't look at the visual as much. Look at us. All right, make eye contact with us. All right, and then maintain control of your visual aid at all times. All right. This means that if you're going to click on a link for a video, you know the link is going to work. And if for some reason it doesn't work, we don't spend 5 minutes trying to make it work. This also means that we know the order that things are going to pop up in. All right, so you're not surprised by any information that pops up on your screen. It's the correct format. It's the correct draft of your visual that you want to share with us. I've seen countless times people get up there and then they realize, oh, this is the wrong visual. This isn't the one I wanted to use. You must maintain control of it. All right, it does not control the presentation, you do. So you must maintain control of your visual aid. Okay, now when we're talking about tips for delivering an effective presentation, so if you have this really good visual aid, great, but what do you need to do? What do you need to make sure happens to make sure that you get the best grade possible and you're engaging your audience with effective speaking and presenting? Okay, so I've got 10 things I want you to try to avoid or try to include in your presentation. Okay, number one is make eye contact. Okay, so it's kind of hard to demonstrate this over a computer screen, but eye contact is probably the most important thing to engaging your audience. Now, you guys are maybe looking out because there might not be a ton of people in the room while you're presenting. However, you still need to make sure that you're looking at every single person at some point that's in the room. If you completely ignore, say there's 3 people in the room, and you completely ignore 2 of them and you only look at 1 of them, a couple things are going to happen. One, the person you're constantly looking at is going to feel a little bit uncomfortable, right? It's kind of awkward if they only look at if you're only looking at them during the presentation. The other thing that's going to happen is the 2 people you're not looking at are going to feel completely disengaged. Have you ever been in a group conversation where there's like 5, say there's 5 of you, and the person talking completely doesn't look at you? It's like, hello, I'm here. Why don't you look at me? You should look at me when you're talking. All right. So eye contact is very, very important to engaging your audience. Okay. Don't just look at me necessarily. Don't look at the wall. Don't look down at the ground. Don't look up at the ceiling, but look at your audience. Okay. The second thing is smooth transitions. So if you are working with a group, this means that there are smooth transitions between speakers. So you know when your time stops and another person's speaking time begins. Okay, this also means points of the speech that you understand what's coming next, and there's no rough transition from one point to the next, that you clearly segue and transition from one point to the next. Okay, and then the last thing you need to do is practice, 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 practice. You should practice your presentation at least 3 times. And guys, I cannot stress this enough. I don't know how many times I've seen people do such great work leading up to the presentation, but then when their actual presentation gets here, it stinks because they didn't practice, and then it just totally ruins and negates all that work they put into that presentation. Okay, no one cares necessarily about rehearsal. All they care about is the final performance. Okay, so you need to make sure that you actually practice to ensure the best final performance possible. Okay. All right. Then the next thing is rate of speech, right? You want to make sure that you talk at a very appropriate rate of speech. You don't want to talk so fast we can understand what you're saying, because then we can understand what you're saying, and then it gets really, really distracting. We're wondering where you take a breath, blah, 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 blah. Right. If you talk so quickly that we are more focused on when you're going to take a breath than we are on the presentation itself, that is a problem. You will be nervous, so talk slower than you think you need to ensure that your audience can understand everything that's being said. Okay. You also want to talk in an appropriate volume. You don't want to shout. You don't want to whisper, but talk in a very comfortable speaking voice. Okay. The next thing is body language. So this next one might apply to those of you who have longer hair, but you don't want to be kind of always, running your fingers through your hair. Maybe like if you have a necklace on or something, like playing with your jewelry or playing with your glasses or whatever. You don't want to be fidgety, right? So make sure you practice how you're going to actually stand. Are you going to put your hands in your pockets? Are you going to talk with your hands? What are you going to do? But you want to minimize the distracting mannerisms and nervous mannerisms that might come out during a presentation. Okay. No sitting. So if you're in a group, you are always standing regardless of whether or not you're presenting. When I teach in a classroom, I teach from my feet. I don't teach sitting down. So I expect you guys to be standing up when you're presenting. Now the next thing is food and drink. I said gum chewing because that tends to be the most common, but food and drink. Now it's totally appropriate to have a bottle of water, right? See, you have a bottle of water. It's totally appropriate to have a bottle of water, and while you're talking, every once in a while you need to take a drink to kind of clear the cotton mouth out of your, clear the cotton out of your mouth and get a good speaking voice. But it's not appropriate to kind of be slurping on your coffee and, sorry, hold on. Okay, and slurping and spilling drinks and things like that, that's not appropriate. A bottle of water is one thing, but any food or other drink, if you're up there, kind of smacking on a piece of gum or on a mint or something, it's distracting and quite honestly, it's kind of gross. So I'm trying to minimize that as try to not just don't do it. Make sure all food and drink is out of your way, with maybe the exception of a bottle of water. Okay. Now my last three things are this: laughing and distractions. I understand things happen. I get that sometimes we might say something that's a little funny. And I'm not saying you have to be like stone cold serious the entire time, but when laughing becomes so prominent in your presentation that it's distracting from your message, then I take issue. So make sure that you minimize all laughing and, again, distracting mannerisms and things like that are going to detract from your message. Okay. The next one is ums. Now I will not sit back and grade your presentation and count the number of times you say ums or ands or ers or uhs or all that stuff. I'm not going to do that. What I do have an issue with, though, is when you start using so much that it's it's apparent that you don't know what you're saying anymore. Then I have an issue. Okay, so make sure that you practice your information, you practice delivering your presentation enough that you know what you're going to say, you know the information, and that will minimize the amount of ums that slip into your presentation. Okay. The last thing is just, I've said it before, is control your visual. Again, make sure you know what's coming next. Make sure that all the information in your visual looks good, it works. If there's any videos, make sure all the components are there in your visual to make sure that it enhances your message, it doesn't distract from your message. Okay. So everything we covered. So the tips for PowerPoint and visual aids, that's 25% of your grade. And then being a good speaker is also 25% of your grade. Okay. If you're working in a group, the only part of your presentation where your grade will be differentiated is in the speaking, because it's not fair to penalize one person for the perhaps ineffective speaking of another person. So I won't do that. But other than that, your grades will be exactly the same. The last thing, the very last thing I want to tell you is an opportunity that you have for extra credit. If on the day of your presentation you would like to dress up and look nice, you can earn 5 points extra credit. What this means, what does dressing up mean? Okay, it means that there are no tennis shoes, there are no jeans, there are no sweatpants, there are no t-shirts. You look nice,